So we've been doing a lot with Faire behind the scenes for a while now.
I spent a lot of time with Casey.
Yes, we've gotten to spend a lot of time together, which has been great. Faire has been such an amazing platform and team to be able to understand more and more. But before we jump into the session, we'd love for you to explain to everybody here what is Faire.
Yeah, so Faire is an online wholesale marketplace that connects independent retailers with brands. So you can kind of think of us as an online trade show, though we're a lot more than that. So on one side of the marketplace are brands. There's lots of Faire customers at Fulfilled today. And these folks make products, and they come to Faire to list their products on Faire, and primarily to find distribution. So historically, you might have had to pay sales reps. You might have had to fly around to trade shows. You might still do those things, but you can come to Faire today, and you get access to hundreds of thousands of independent retailers around the world. And then on the other side of the marketplace are those independent retailers. So today we have high hundreds of thousands of independent retailers in North America, Europe, and those folks come to Faire primarily to find great products for their store. So we have millions of products now. We have gotten very smart at matching those right products with those retailers that we know will sell in their store. And then we also offer them the best value. So we give them payment terms, free shipping, a handful of other things to really use our size and scale to help independent retailers find the best products at the best prices.
Yeah, I love it. And we actually came out back in December. We had the team fly out to San Francisco to spend some time with him and his team. And I didn't tell Jeff I was going to mention this, but they have an internal Faire app, so they know where all the Faire retailers are located. So you can go in and see a bunch of the products from all the different brands. And so maybe we can peer pressure them into making that a public app soon as well, because I know there are a lot of Faire fanboys and fangirls out there. So you guys have become the go-to platform, not just in the US, but really becoming the global go-to platform for independent retail. When you and your co-founders, I know you guys all started working together over at Square. You guys launched Faire about a decade ago.
Yep.
What was it that you guys saw where there was just this massive gap in the market for you guys to want to go after and build this, now very, very influential marketplace?
Yeah, I think the idea and the kernel of the idea, and my co-founder kind of had the kernel, really came from our experience at Square and then some of our experience in the wholesale space as well. So one of my jobs at Square was flying around and kind of hosting the Square team at trade shows. So I probably went to 100 trade shows a year for a couple of years and really got a firsthand glimpse into how wholesale worked. And then my co-founder, Max, he actually on the side ran an umbrella company. So he was working at Square, and he had this umbrella startup. And so he would on the weekends go to trade shows and was literally a brand trying to find distribution into independent and big box retail. And so we'd kind of have this experience on our weekends of this seemingly antiquated kind of wholesale space that felt like it had been, this is 2011 to 2015, really largely untouched by technology. And then during the week, we'd be working at Square, which was at the forefront of building technology tools for small businesses. We saw firsthand, I think this was one of the first waves of SMBs really adopting technology and the internet in a meaningful way. We saw the impact that was having on small businesses and how Faire had, really materially changed how they operated. And I think it was kind of those two experiences. Wow, look at this huge market that we keep interacting with that feels like it's been untouched by technology, and these customers are super underserved. And then we can see the value of when you bring technology to these small businesses.
It wasn't a candle brand?
It wasn't a candle brand. Our first brands were largely candle brands. That was because Max had been an umbrella brand. He was in the kind of the home and gift space, and so we had a lot of relationships with home and gift retailers and candle companies. And so there's a joke at Faire that we were a candle company for a very long time. We still ship a lot of candles, but we ship a lot of other stuff now too.
What were some of the things maybe that you guys took from Square when you saw the rapid adoption and the scale that they were able to achieve, very quickly, and apply those to the early days of Faire?
Yeah, I think part of our insight and what we realized, you can think of commerce as having there's this triangle, three people. There's brands, there's retailers, there's consumers. And a lot of the entrepreneurial energy in companies that have been started were connecting brands to consumers or retailers to consumers. Google did this, DoorDash, Facebook. There's all these huge companies, billion, not trillion, I guess, dollar companies started kind of on those legs of the triangle. And I think there had not been a lot of entrepreneurial energy focused on that third leg, connecting brands and retailers. And that's despite it being $100 billion, huge market. And I think it was because there just weren't as many people exposed to it. Mm-hmm. And then I think the folks who did have that vantage point, who kind of had some exposure to wholesale, I don't think fully appreciated the problem, and this is a little bit of what we took from Square. We weren't the first people to wander around a huge expo hall or trade show hall and think, this is a little bit crazy, none of this is online, this is completely offline, this feels a little off. But I think if you just take a trade show and put it online, you're not solving the fundamental problem for a retailer trying to stock their store. Mm-hmm. The fundamental problem of a retailer trying to stock their store is, can I get a product that I know is going to sell to my customers at the right margin? If it sits on my shelf, if I have to mark it down, I already have thin margins. Kind of taking a risk of buying something online when I can't touch and feel the product, I can't interact with the brand, that doesn't solve my problem. Mm-hmm. And I think the insight that we took from Square was amazing at taking data and technology, kind of putting it in the background, but then delivering an experience that was powered by that. And I think the big unlock for Faire and what really moved this market online was we offered free returns and we underwrote and gave net 60 payment terms for our retailers. That might sound like a small thing, but if, you're running Casey's, I feel like a surf shop you would maybe run.
There we go, surf shop.
Yeah, Casey's surf shop, and you have to buy the goods before they sell in your store. That's hard for you to manage from a cash flow perspective, but with Faire, we are very good at underwriting. We use the data available. We use that experience at Square. You don't have to pay us till those products actually sell in your store. And we actually guarantee they're going to sell. You can return them to us if they don't. And I think that was kind of the fundamental thing that moved this market online, that then allowed you, once the market moved online, to aggregate all these customers, use the power of technology of our scale to give better prices, better discovery to kind of the entire market.
Yeah, I want to dig more into those in a little bit, where you guys just continue to find these, I don't even know if I want to call it adjacent because they're built into like the core product, but the ways that you can continue to enable these smaller customers of yours on both sides of the marketplace. But on that note, and you mentioned with Square that did such a good job with SMBs, it's interesting where constraints in the business, such as with Faire or with ShipBob, can really drive a lot of value in the near term and the long term. And so you couldn't service these extremely large retailers, and that's not who you're building for to start with anyways, or you couldn't really service these really large brands to start, just like we couldn't in the first couple of years of ShipBob. What were the values you saw in that to then build out this truly small, like the SMB solution, as you guys have now continued to really, really go up market on both sides of the marketplace?
Yeah, I think we started with SMB and smaller retailers. I think one, we were super familiar with that customer. And I do think, another lesson from Square, and I think any successful company, and probably all of the companies in this room too, is just focusing on the customer and deeply understanding their pain points and really making sure that every single thing you're doing is solving and creating customer value. I think we had a really deep understanding of the problem those customers faced. I think we also had kind of an intuition around how to reach them and how to build experiences for them because we had done that at Square. And we always felt like we were going to get kind of pulled up market because many of our smaller brands or smaller retailers aspire to be bigger customers. Mm-hmm. We certainly don't want anyone to ever outgrow Faire, to not be able to use Faire because they've been too successful. We help our smaller brands and retailers become larger. One of the biggest value props that we bring to both sides of our marketplace is, when a call it medium-sized to big-sized brand joins Faire, they see 1,000 new relationships in their first year on Faire. So they're growing pretty meaningfully even in that first year, and we want to be able to serve them as their business gets more complex. There's some balancing there because some of those needs are unique and they don't necessarily serve the smaller customers, but we aspire to be able to serve all of our customers as they keep growing.
Yeah. I know from one of our first conversations that really was such an eye-opener for me on like the complexities of what you're building with Faire is like the search. Yeah. And so it's like a hat's not just a hat, and based off of the store, which can vary even within the same geography. What were some of the things that you maybe underestimated in the early days of just the complexity that was needed, even to today?
Yeah, and like a little more context for what Casey's referencing, when retailers come to Faire today, they search for products, much like a consumer might search on Amazon. It's a bit more of a complex process when you're buying wholesale than when you're buying toilet paper as a consumer. You're thinking about the margin you're going to make on that product. You're thinking about how is that going to merchandise in your store. You're thinking about what are the order minimums I need to hit per brand. When do I need to kind of reorder, and how do I think about the inventory quantities? It's this end-to-end purchasing process that we try to make and feel like a consumer Amazon experience, but has all this complexity embedded in it. And one of the most important variables is when you search for something on Faire, how do we show you what you want? if you're a surf shop in Venice and you search for San Diego, Venice, wherever, and you search for hat, you're going to see really different items than if you were a children's store in New York or you were a cowboy store in Marfa, Texas. And that is a mix of us getting really, really smart at what each store is. We don't want to ask you. We don't want to be like, hey, tell us 100 things about your store. That's not a great experience. You're probably going to be like, yeah, screw it. I'm out of here, or ignore these questions and see what comes up. We have to be able to discern that based on your behavior, what's available publicly about you. And then the other thing is we need to have the supply to be able to show you that.
Yeah.
So I think a big thing that has changed, from 8 or 9 years ago at Faire versus today is we now have, tens of millions of products, almost 100,000 brands. So it might have been the case that we wanted to show you surf hats 5 years ago, but we could show you like a couple, and then we can maybe show you some other just random surf stuff, and then some cowboy hats. And today we have the depth of supply in the catalog that we can be super tailored to what you're searching for. And most of our customers now, the bulk of the volume that gets ordered on Faire today is from customers that have been interacting with Faire for some time. So we actually know a lot about the stores, and we can really get the right brands in front of our retailers. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the single atomic unit of success for Faire is, are we matching our brands and retailers? Are those products selling through in our retailer stores, so then they're ordering more from those brands? That's kind of the entire equation that we need to get right.
Have you been to Marfa, Texas?
I actually haven't been to Marfa, Texas.
Yeah.
But we have a great slide that just shows hat, and we just pulled what 3 different customers' experience looks like when they search for hat. And I was like, where is there some good cowboy stores? And I just pulled a random retailer in Marfa, and their entire first page was really, really beautiful cowboy hats.
I've somehow been to Marfa.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. One of the things
Next fulfilled, Marfa.
Yeah, we'll put it up for a
Have
vote.
some lodging issues.
So one of the things I've been so impressed with your guys' team across the board is just especially once you guys have high conviction, is just the speed that you guys move, and also the speed along with the thinking about the scale. But you guys are just so methodical about it. How have you seen AI empower your teams and then therefore your customers to just really pour fuel on a company that was already moving very, very fast?
Yeah, I definitely think that from very early on, if not the beginning, like speed was just such a focus. It was both speed to learning. I think movement just creates learning. So move, ship stuff, get feedback from customers, and almost like both an obligation to try to improve the experience as much as possible for customers, and a paranoia that if you don't, somebody else will. And especially I think when you're a small brand, a small customer, a small fulfillment operation, your main advantage is speed. Like if it was just resources or dollars, you'd kind of lose 10 out of 10 times because there are bigger people with more resources, but you can move just so much faster. And I think as we become a bigger company, we've tried our hardest to maintain that as much as possible. And it's hard, but I think that is definitely like a big focus of our organization is just how do we move as fast as possible at all times. The second part to your question?
Like, I guess how are you guys incentivizing the right behavior to drive like AI adoption, and then just some of the wins you guys are seeing from that?
So I think at the highest level, we are a technology company. We are bringing technology and the benefits that can create for our customers. Like that is one of the fundamental things I think philosophically we're doing, whether that is the data that we can give, whether that's our scale, just how can we create more value for our customers with technology. AI is just another technology. I think that it is probably the most powerful platform shift we've seen, certainly since we've started the company. So it's a supercharged technology, but I don't think our customers particularly care about like AI being used in their face as much as the experiences that we can create with it. And I think that can sometimes get lost in the rhetoric around it, or like the LinkedIn posts, the obligatory LinkedIn posts around how folks are using AI. So for us, we think, okay, if I were to really distill down the 3 reasons that customers come to Faire, it's on the retailer side to discover great products, or to grow their sales and deliver those products on the brand side. It's to get the best prices on the retailer side, or to provide the best value on the brand side. And it's to manage your business in one place much easier. Historically, brands would be getting orders over email or fax machine or text message, and now they can manage the hundreds of orders they have coming in through their Faire platform. And we think of AI as supercharging all of those value props. I do think that retailers will increasingly search for products not just by entering a search term at the top of a bar, but by having a conversation or kind of searching in more ideas, and we have a discovery experience that's powered by AI that allows that. I think that, if I think of a lot of our brands and customers managing their workflows, today we have, again, AI behind the scenes that isn't necessarily in your face, but it's making onboarding much faster and cheaper. It's allowing us to update and fix, listing quality issues on our platform. It's a sidekick that's answering questions for our brands, that's helping them take actions eventually for what they need to do to increase their sales on their platform. So I think there's kind of all the value props that should be supercharged by a technology that's more powerful than kind of anything that we've applied. And then there's the internal stuff around how do we move just much, much faster because we have AI, because we can ship a roadmap that might have taken 3 to 5 years in 1 year, and we can deliver customer value more fast.
Nice. And we'll get to some of those in a sec. But we have not really retailers in the audience, but brands. And so what are some of the misconceptions you think brands have before they're deciding to go in on Faire?
You can yell them out if people have concerns. I think that there are a few, and I think particularly as we've gotten bigger. I think one is the amount of control you have as a brand. I think that it's sometimes we hear, well, I can't join Faire because I lose control over my distribution or how my products are presented. And that is something from very early on we have made sure that we don't want brands to feel. You can choose your prices, which products you carry. Most importantly, you can choose to accept or not accept an order. I think it's extremely important for brands, we know, to have control over their distribution. You don't want to hand over the stores that are going to be merchandising and carrying your product and the customers that it's going to be, kind of that story is going to be told to. And so that kind of element of control, you can accept, you can deny any orders you want, I think is a bit of a misconception at times. And then maybe another one that I'd probably concede was like maybe more fair early on was that we didn't work with other channels. I think we probably had posturing that was a little bit more positioned against sales reps or trade shows when we were much smaller. Some of that was probably accidental as we were trying to kind of figure out our story and how we tell it. But our intention is not, I hope people do the majority of their sales and buying through Faire. I think we see that with the bulk of our customers, but we also know that trade shows and sales reps can be a valuable channel. And we've done a lot of work over the last 3 or 4 years so that Faire and cannot just coexist, but brands can manage their sales across all those channels effectively. And they're talking to each other, the attribution works. We have a relationship with those sales reps that allows brands to grow their sales as much as possible. And I hope that's primarily through Faire, but we want to do it in a way that works in the entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I think that was a misconception, but one that was maybe a little bit more fair 5, 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think that just maybe acceptance of retail has increased. And we were chatting with Ben Diamond, the CEO of True Classic yesterday, and one of the things he shared was, because they do such an exceptional job with digital marketing, and that drove the whole business for so long. And he met one of their largest customers. He saw like their basket size over the history of him being a customer was like astronomical. And he was talking to him, and he's like, for years I did not buy, and then you guys finally were selling in Costco, and I was there with my dad, and I was actually able to feel the fabric and try it on. And then ever since then, it's been like wildfire, and he'll buy online, but it's the value of picking up that candle to smell it, or try on that shirt, or try on that hat, because you can actually see it there. And you guys are unlocking this huge scale of all these independent retailers all over, not just the US, but the world as well. A question that I have that is probably my maybe most selfish question, because I'm fascinated by marketplaces and like the chicken and the egg of like, do you get the supplier the demand first? How'd you guys go about that in the early days of Faire?
I think that we started in a very narrow vertical. I think that was very helpful. As we today, there's probably no vertical across food and bev, babies and kid, bath and beauty, clothing, gift and home that's more than 20% of the business. But to our candle conversation earlier, we started very narrowly in kind of home and gift. And I think definitely the brand side in a sales motion initially, so that when retailers showed up, there were brands there and they kind of weren't burning that experience. I think the thing that we benefited the most from, and you mentioned earlier constraints and kind of that breeding creativity and figuring out kind of how you scale the business. We didn't have huge paid marketing budgets. We weren't a very large company. Most of our early growth came from referrals. It was, Casey runs his surf shop. I sell surf t-shirts. What happened historically was you might text me and say, hey, I want to order 24 more of this SKU. And what happened with our referral with Faire and kind of the referral system we built is instead I would text you back my Faire link, and you would order through Faire. It was much easier for me. We incentivized that because it was like our customer acquisition cost to you.
Yes.
And you became a Faire customer. And I think that kind of, there was a similar referral motion on kind of the other side of the network. And that kind of referral nature of growth, I think, helped us roughly try to kind of keep in balance the chicken and egg problem and kind of grow retailers and brands in concert with each other, because we don't want to onboard a bunch of customers and them not get any sales.
Yeah.
We need to be kind of thoughtful about how we scale both sides of the marketplace. And then it also ended up being this kind of nifty way that I don't think I would have thought initially for jumping all those categories I mentioned. Because I might make apparel and you would think I only kind of sell into clothing shops, but actually I sell into surf shops. I actually sell into coffee shops and sell a couple t-shirts in the corner. And so there's a lot of cross-pollination across the verticals on the brand and retailer side that referral network ended up kind of really supercharging.
So you attracted the retailers who would then pull in the people who were obviously trying to make revenue from it. So the brands that we're selling into.
Yeah, exactly.
And then obviously continued to work on that flywheel.
It's kind of this flywheel, yeah.
Very interesting. So as we mentioned earlier, we've spent a lot of time together over the last year and a half, 2 years.
It's been great, to be clear.
Yes.
It's been great.
A big reason is what we're building on the fulfillment side. And so if you want to, again, it's so